The trade that started it all, Jack sat alone in the corner of a small space outpost bar, staring at the last thing he had to sell, a dark glass bottle filled with amber liquid. It was old Earth whiskey, smooth and rare, the kind that made aliens curious and humans nostalgic. He had been on this outpost for 3 days, trying to sell the rest of his cargo. Everything else was gone. But no one wanted whiskey, not in this far corner of the galaxy. The bar was quiet. Only the low hum of old machines and the faint clink of glasses breaking the silence. Then the door slid open, and the air in the room seemed to change. A tall alien woman stepped inside. Her movements graceful but powerful. Her skin shimmered like silver under the dim lights, and her eyes were a deep violet. She wore long dark robes that hinted at wealth, and on her fingers shone rings that looked older than the outpost itself. The bartender straightened as if a queen had entered. The woman's gaze swept over the room and landed on Jack. She walked toward him with slow, confident steps. "Human trader," she said, her voice smooth but carrying an edge. "I hear you have something rare." Jack lifted the bottle. "Earth whiskey," he replied, keeping his tone casual. She tilted her head slightly, studying it as if she could see through the glass and into its history. "How much?" she asked. Jack hesitated. "Depends on how much you want it." She gave a small smile, dangerous, knowing enough, she said simply, and sat down across from him. They spoke for a few minutes, and Jack learned her name, Lady Vera. She didn't say much about herself, but he could tell she was someone important here. Her words were polite, but every movement suggested authority when she finally took the bottle in her hands. She uncorked it and sniffed the air as if inhaling a memory. Her eyes softened for just a moment. "This will do," she whispered to herself. Then, without asking, she poured a small amount into a glass the bartender brought over. She took a sip, closed her eyes, and exhaled slowly. "Yes. This is exactly what I need," she murmured. Jack named his price. Tea was high, but not ridiculous. To his surprise, she didn't even haggle. She simply slid a small pouch across the table, filled with coins stamped in a script Jack didn't recognize. As he reached for the payment, she placed her other hand over his. Her grip was warm and firm. "On my world," she said softly. "Such a gift marks a bond between giver and receiver." Jack frowned. "It's just a trade." Her smile deepened, and for the first time, it seemed almost amused. "Yes," she agreed, "a trade," but there was something in her tone that made Jack uneasy. She stood, holding the bottle carefully, as if it were a living thing. Before leaving, she leaned down close to him. "We will see each other again soon." "Jack of Earth," she said. Then she walked out, the door sliding shut behind her. The bartender, who had been pretending not to listen, let out a slow breath. "You know who that was?" he asked in a low voice. Jack shook his head. "Lady Vera," the bartender whispered, "stepmother of the Vale. You just gave her something precious." Jack shrugged. "So what? I needed the money." The bartender looked at him for a long moment before saying, "On her world, that kind of gift. It's not just business." Jack didn't understand what the man meant, but he didn't care. He had enough credits now to fuel his ship and get moving again. Still, as he left the bar that night, a strange unease followed him. It wasn't fear. Exactly, more like the feeling you get when you've stepped into something bigger than you realize. He told himself it was nothing, just another trade, just another customer. But deep down, a voice in his head whispered that this was the start of something he couldn't walk away from. Far above the outpost, a sleek alien ship drifted in silence. Inside, Lady Vera sat in a private chamber, sipping the whiskey and smiling faintly in the shadows behind her. 3 young alien girls listened as she said, "Prepare your things. Your new husband will come soon." Jack woke to the sound of voices. It wasn't his ship's AI, and it wasn't coming from his comms. It was soft, musical chatter in a language he didn't understand. Blinking against the ship's dim lights, he sat up in his bunk and rubbed his eyes. That's when he noticed he wasn't alone. 3 figures stood in the middle of his small living space. They were clearly alien skin tones shifting between soft pastels and faint glows. Eyes like gemstones, each wore simple robes, but their posture was regal. One was tall and slender, probably close to Jack's age. With calm, watchful eyes, another was shorter, her expression fierce. Her stance like a soldier ready for a fight. The last was the smallest. Her big, bright eyes, curious, and her smile playful. All 3 were staring right at him. Jack's first instinct was to grab his sidearm from the wall rack. But before he could reach it, the tallest one stepped forward and spoke in a careful, accented voice. "You are our husband," she said. Jack froze. "What?" The smallest one giggled, covering her mouth, and repeated the word in her own language. The fierce one folded her arms. "It is the law," she added. Jack shook his head. No. You've got the wrong guy." But they didn't seem to hear him more. They didn't care. Instead, they began exploring his ship like they already lived there. The smallest one poked at the navigation console. The fierce one inspected his weapons. Rack, the tall one, moved with slow grace, studying every detail as if memorizing her new home. "All right, time out," Jack snapped, stepping in front of them. "Who sent you?" The tall one tilted her head. "Lady Vera," she said simply. Jack's stomach dropped. "Of course," he muttered. The fierce one stepped closer, her sharp eyes narrowing. "You gave her the gift." Jack frowned. "It was a trade-just business." The smallest one laughed again. "On our world, there is no such thing." Jack took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "Listen, I don't know what you've been told, but I am not your." Before he could finish, the ship's comms buzzed. The screen lit up with the face of a passing alien trader, one Jack knew casually from the docks. The trader's eyes widened when he saw the 3 girls behind Jack. "You?" The trader hissed. "You accepted the stepmother's daughters." Jack groaned. "Accepted? They broke into my ship." The trader's face went pale. "No, human. They were sent, and that means you are bound." Jack's pulse quickened. "Bound to what?" The trader looked around nervously, as if someone might be listening to them. He said, "To her. Until death." The comms went dark before Jack could ask more. The fierce daughter crossed her arms again. "You will keep us safe," she said, as if it were a fact. The tall one's voice softened. "It is already decided." The smallest one hopped onto the arm of his pilot's chair, swinging her legs. "We like our new husband," she said with a grin. Jack pressed his hands over his face, muttering, "This is insane." As the day went on, he tried to figure out how they had gotten aboard. His security logs showed no forced entry. No alarms, just an authorization override keyed in by someone who knew exactly how his ship worked. Lady Vera, obviously, every time he tried to explain to the girls that he wasn't staying. They only responded with calm certainty. The tall one would say, "It is the way of the veil." The fierce one would warn, "Leaving us is death." And the smallest one would just smile and ask if she could fly the ship. By evening, Jack sat in the pilot's chair, staring out at the void. His ship felt smaller now, filled with 3 strangers who acted like they owned it. Yet, there was something unsettling beyond just their presence. He had caught them glancing at the windows, nervously, as if expecting something. When he asked why, the fierce one only muttered, "Eyes are watching." That night, Jack locked his cabin, but hours later, he woke again, this time to the faint sound of movement in the corridors. He stepped out quietly, hand on his pistol. The fierce one was there, standing guard at the ship's main hatch, blade in hand. In the dim light, he saw her ears twitch toward the sound of footsteps outside the ship. She glanced at him, eyes cold. "Go back inside, husband," is not safe tonight. Jack didn't know it yet. But this was the first sign having Lady Vera's daughters wasn't just strange. It was dangerous, and somewhere in the shadows beyond the docking bay, someone was already making plans to take them back. The next morning, Jack woke to the smell of something strange in the air. It wasn't the recycled scent of the ship's filters, and it wasn't engine fumes. It was sweet spice, like a drink being brewed. When he stepped into the lounge, he froze. Lady Vera was sitting at his small dining table. She was sipping from a steaming cup, her silver skin catching the faint light through the viewport. The three daughters stood behind her in a neat row, silent as statues. "How did you get in here?" Jack demanded. Vera smiled faintly, the same way my daughters did. Husband Jack clenched his jaw. "I'm not your..." She raised a hand to silence him. "We will not waste time arguing over words," she said, her tone firm. "I am here to make the terms clear." She set the cup down. "And the sound was louder than it should have been in our culture," she began. "A gift given freely, without request for equal return, is a bond. Stronger than law, stronger than contract." Jack crossed his arms. "It wasn't a gift. I sold it to you. You did not demand payment before placing it in my hand," she interrupted, her eyes glinting like sharp glass. "That is enough for the Vale's law." Jack shook his head. "Even if that's true, why send your daughters to me?" Vera's smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Because they are mine to protect," she said, "and enemies close in." She leaned forward slightly. "You are human, from a distant world. Your name is not in our politics. You cannot be bought by our rivals, and that makes you useful." Jack felt his stomach twist. "Useful? You mean as a shield?" Vara didn't deny it. "As their husband, no one can touch them without challenging you." She let the words hang in the air before adding, "And challenging you means challenging me." Jack stared at her. "And if I say no?" The smile vanished from her face. Her voice became soft, but there was steel beneath. "It refuse, and the law says you abandon them, which would make you their enemy." She tilted her head slightly. "And enemies do not live long on this station." The fierce daughter stepped forward then, her voice low. "Mother, let me handle this." Vera held up a hand to stop her. "This is not a threat, Jack of Earth," she continued. "It is a truth you must understand." Jack glanced at the three girls. The tall one's expression was unreadable. The fierce one's eyes burned, and the smallest still wore that playful smile. Though her fingers gripped the edge of the table a little too tightly, they weren't just passengers now. They were leverage. They were also under his protection, whether he wanted it or not. "Why me?" Jack asked quietly. "You could have picked any human traitor." Vera's eyes softened just a little. "You brought something rare from your world," she said. "You carried it across star systems and offered it without fear, without lies." She leaned back in her chair. "It told me something about you, that you value what you have and you do not give it lightly." Then her tone hardened again. "And now you cannot give them up." Jack rubbed the back of his neck, feeling trapped. "This is insane," he muttered. Vera rose from the table, her height and presence filling the room. "You have until the next cycle to decide whether you will claim them fully," she said. "If you do, I will see you protected, supplied, and given safe harbor anywhere the Vale holds power." She stepped toward the hatch, the daughters following in perfect formation. "And if I don't?" Jack called after her. She paused in the doorway, glancing over her shoulder. "Then I will mourn you," she said simply, and the hatch closed behind her. Jack stood in the empty lounge for a long time, the hum of the ship suddenly louder than usual. His mind raced to leave the station immediately, or hear her out. The smart move was to get as far away as possible, but as he turned toward the cockpit, he caught sight of something on the table. A small, silver pendant lay their symbol carved into its surface. It was warm to the touch and the moment. He held it. His ship's console pinged with a notification. Diplomatic priority clearance granted. Jack frowned. "What game are you playing, Vera?" he muttered. Outside, somewhere in the darkness of space, silent ships waited. And their captains spoke in hushed tones. "The human has them now," one voice said. "We must act before the bond is sealed." Jack didn't sleep much that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lady Vera's silver gaze and heard her calm, dangerous voice. He tried to tell himself it wasn't his problem, that he could just leave before the next cycle she had mentioned. But deep down, he knew walking away wouldn't be that easy by morning. The three daughters were acting as if they had lived on his ship their entire lives. The tall one, Lyra, was quietly organizing the storage compartments without asking. The fierce one, Koresh, was polishing his blaster rifles with the care of a soldier, and the smallest Piri was sitting in the pilot seat pretending to steer the ship. "Move over, Captain," she giggled. "I can fly faster than you." Jack rolled his eyes. "Kid, you don't even know what half these buttons do." "Yes, I do," she said confidently, and pressed one. The ship's alarm blared instantly. Jack sighed and shut it off. That was the emergency distress beacon. Piri just smiled innocently. Oops, he was about to tell her off when the ship's AI chimed. Unidentified vessel approaching. Jack frowned and opened the external feed. A sleek black craft was drifting toward them. No ID codes, no lights. "Stay here," he ordered the girls, grabbing his sidearm and heading to the hatch controls. But Koresh followed him, blade in hand. "I told you before," she said. "Eyes are watching." "This is them." The vessel stopped just outside docking range. Jack opened comms. "This is private property. Identify yourself." No response, just static. Then a voice crackled through, deep and cold. "Return the daughters, human, and you live." Jack glanced at Koresh, who only tightened her grip on her blade. "You've got the wrong guy," Jack replied. "I don't," the voice interrupted. "We know who you are and what you were given." The black craft suddenly powered weapons. Before Jack could react, Koresh slammed the hatch controls, sealing it. "They won't fire," she said flatly. "Not yet. They want to take us alive." Moments later, the ship jolted. Magnetic clamps had locked onto the hull. Boarding, Jack's heart pounded. "Lyra, Piri, get to the safe room," Koresh shouted. The two ran without argument. Jack readied his blaster. "I told you I didn't sign up for this," Koresh smirked. "Too late, husband." The first intruder breached the hatcha, tall armored alien with a stun pike. Jack fired without hesitation, dropping him before he hit the floor. Another rushed in, and Koresh moved like lightning, her blade flashing once before the attacker fell. For several minutes, the narrow corridors echoed with the sounds of blaster fire and steel striking armor. Jack found himself moving in sync with Koresh, covering her flank while she darted in close. When the last intruder fell, Jack stood panting in the smoke-filled hallway. Koresh sheathed her blade and gave him a sharp look. "You fight better than I thought," she said, almost approvingly. Jack wiped sweat from his brow. "And you're full of surprises." The AI reported that the black craft had released its clamps and was retreating. But Jack knew this wasn't the end, was only the first wave. When they returned to the lounge, Lyra and Piri were waiting. Piri ran to him, grabbing his arm. "You didn't leave us," she said, almost in wonder. Jack froze for a moment, then gently patted her head. "Couldn't, kid," he muttered. "They were on my ship." But Lyra's eyes studied him quietly, as if she was measuring his worth. Later, when the girls were resting, Jack sat alone in the cockpit. He replayed the attack in his mind, the precision of it, the way they had known exactly where to board. Someone had given them his ship's docking codes, and there was only one person who could have done that. Lady Vera. The realization burned in his chest. Was she testing him? Did she want to see if he would fight for the daughters before truly binding him to them? The thought made him grit his teeth when Koresh joined him. Leaning casually against the doorway, she said, "You want the truth? This will happen again." Jack glanced at her. "Because of your stepmother." Koresh nodded. "She believes. Loyalty is proven in blood." "Today, you spilled some." Jack shook his head. "She set this up. Koresh didn't deny it, and you passed." Jack leaned back in his seat, staring out at the stars. The truth was, he didn't know if he was angry or starting to care. But one thing was clear. He was no longer just a bystander in this. He had fought for them once, and in doing so, he had taken his first step into their dangerous world. Far away, aboard her silver flagship, Lady Vera sipped her whiskey and listened to the report when told that the human had held his ground. She smiled faintly. "Good," she murmured. "He might yet be worthy." The day after the attack, the ship felt different. Jack had patched the blast marks in the corridor and repaired the hatch, but the air still carried a heaviness. Lyra spoke even less than usual. Piri stuck close to him like a shadow, and Koresh was constantly checking weapons and scanning for threats. They all knew this wasn't over. Jack tried to keep busy running maintenance, plotting a course away from the outpost, but every system check showed the same thing: his ship was being tracked. Someone had attached a signal beacon during the boarding attempt. He cursed under his breath and pulled it out of the hull, tossing it into space. "Think that's the only one?" Koresh asked. Leaning in the doorway, Jack frowned. "You tell me?" She didn't answer. And that silence said enough. By midday, the AI detected multiple vessels in nearby space. They weren't moving directly toward the ship, but they were staying close enough to follow. Jack's stomach tightened like wolves, circling in the dark. "They're waiting," Lyra said softly from the lounge, her voice carrying a strange calm. Jack turned to her. "For what?" "For the order," she replied. "They will not act until someone tells them to." Jack didn't need to ask who that someone was. Lady Vera's invisible hand was still on this. And the worst part? He couldn't tell if she was protecting them or baiting the trap. That night, the girls sat around the table eating in silence until Piri finally spoke. "Are you going to leave us?" she asked. Jack looked up from his food, surprised by the question. "No," he said without thinking. Piri smiled, but Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then you are already one of us," she said. Jack shook his head. "I didn't agree to anything," Koresh smirked. "Doesn't matter, you fought for us. And now they will never stop coming." The words stuck with him long after they went to bed. He found himself pacing in the cockpit, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. He knew running was still possible. He could set a jump to human space and vanish. But every time he pictured leaving, he saw those three faces staring at him. Through the hatch, the decision was taken from him the next morning. The AI's voice cut through the quiet. "Warning. Large vessel approaching at high speed." Jack ran to the console, and his heart sank. It was a war cruiser, bigger than anything the pirates had flown, armed to the teeth. "This isn't random," he muttered. Koresh joined him. Already strapping on her armor, "It's the Red Fang Syndicate," she said. "They're bounty hunters." Before Jack could ask more, the comms lit up. A massive alien filled the screen, scarred and armored. His voice a deep growl. "Human," he said. "You have something that belongs to use three somethings." In fact, Jack's jaw tightened. "They don't belong to you." The alien chuckled. "Everything belongs to the one strong enough to take it. And you are not strong enough." Koresh stepped into view, her eyes blazing. "Come and try," she hissed. The alien's smile widened. "We will," and the transmission cut. Alarms flared as the cruiser launched smaller attack craft. Jack gunned the engines, weaving through debris fields and asteroid shadows. Lyra's hands moved over the navigation console with surprising skill. Plotting evasive maneuvers, Piri sat strapped in beside him. Her small hands gripping the chair, her usual playful grin gone. Koresh manned the turret, her voice crackling through the comms. "They're testing our defenses. Next pass will be real." Sure enough, the second wave came in fast and hard. Blaster fire raked the shields, shaking the ship. Jack rolled the vessel hard to starboard, forcing two fighters into each other. Koresh's shots lit up the darkness, taking out another. "But there were too many. We can't win this fight." Jack shouted. Lyra's voice was calm. "Then we must run to where they cannot follow." "And where's that?" Jack demanded. She met his eyes. The Veil. Jack's mind raced. Going into the Veil's territory meant walking right into Lady Vara's hands. But out here, the Syndicate would tear them apart. Before he could decide, a new contact appeared. On the sensors, sleek silver and moving fast, Lady Vara's flagship. The comms opened without his input. Her image filled the screen, calm and composed as ever. "You see now?" she said softly. "Why they need you," Jack glared. "You set this up." Her lips curved slightly. "I gave them a reason to show themselves." The flagship's weapons fired, scattering the Syndicate ships in seconds. When the path was clear, she looked at him. "Bring them to me, Jack of Earth. And we will speak of the future." The comms cut, leaving only silence in the cockpit. Piri's small voice broke it. "She saved us." Jack stared at the stars where the flagship had vanished. "No," he murmured. "She's just making." "Sure, we owe her asterisk." Jack didn't answer Lady Vara's summons right away. He sat in the cockpit long after her flagship vanished from the sensors. The stars outside seemed colder, sharper, like they were watching him. He hated the feeling of being moved around like a piece in someone else's game. But he hated even more the thought of the Red Fang Syndicate trying again. The next day, Koresh spent hours sharpening her blade, the metallic sound filling the lounge. Lyra studied star maps, her calm voice quietly suggesting safe routes, and Piri. She followed Jack everywhere, asking if they were going to the wedding soon. Jack nearly choked the first time she said it. "There is no wedding," he told her firmly. She only tilted her head. "Then why do you fight for us?" Jack didn't answer because he didn't have a good one. By evening, his mind was made up. Running would only get them killed sooner or later. The Syndicate would catch up if he wanted them to survive. He needed to stop being just a reluctant escort. He had to act like what everyone already thought. He was their husband. And that meant facing whoever came for them head on. The opportunity came faster than he expected. The AI's warning tone blared in the middle of the night. Multiple boarding craft detected Tecton impact in 30 seconds. Jack was already out of bed, strapping on his holster. Koresh was in the corridor, blade in one hand and a pulse pistol in the other. "They're coming in heavy," she said, her tone almost eager. Lyra appeared from the medbay, carrying a small case. "These are smoke capsules. Use them in narrow corridors." Piri peeked out from behind Lyra, clutching a wrench almost as big as her. Jack knelt to her level. "Stay in the safe room this time," he said. Her voice was small but steady. "Not without you." The first breach shook the ship. Metal screeched as the attackers forced the hatch open. Jack and Koresh took the front, blasters firing in short bursts. The smoke capsules filled the hallway, turning the fight into shadows and flashes of light. Shapes moved in the haze, too many of them. Jack ducked a swinging blade and slammed his elbow into the attacker's chest plate. Koresh moved like a storm, her blade cutting arcs through the smoke. From the comms, Lyra's calm voice directed. "Them two more on your left. One in the vent above you." Jack fired upward without looking, and the sound of a body hitting the floor followed. Piri's voice suddenly cut in. "I'm behind them. Watch this." Before Jack could yell at her to get back, A loud clang echoed down the hall, followed by the hiss of vented coolant. The attackers slipped on the frozen deck, giving Koresh and Jack a chance to push forward. They fought through the corridors, driving the enemy back toward the hatch. One tried to grab Piri, but Jack was faster, slamming the man against the bulkhead and knocking him out cold. When the last attacker stumbled back through the hatch, Koresh sealed it and hit the eject controls. The boarding craft spun away into space, trailing smoke. Silence filled the ship. Broken only by the sound of heavy breathing, Jack leaned against the wall, his heart pounding. Koresh wiped her blade clean and glanced at him. "You're starting to look like a real husband now," she said with a smirk. Jack shot her a tired glare. But he didn't argue. Later, as they checked the ship for damage, Lyra approached him. "You fought harder tonight," she said simply. Jack shrugged. Didn't have much choice. Her eyes softened. Choice or not. "We see you now." That night, Jack sat in the cockpit again, staring at the stars. Piri came in quietly and curled up in the co-pilot's seat. "Are we safe now?" she asked sleepily. Jack sighed. "For now, but more will come," she smiled faintly. "Then you'll fight them." Jack didn't correct Herbie, because for the first time, he knew she was right, far away in the deep halls of the Red Fang Syndicate. The leader slammed his fist into the table. "The human defends them like blood," he growled. Another voice in the shadows replied, "Then we take the blood first. And the human will break." Jack didn't waste time after the last attack. He knew another wave could hit them any hour. The Red Fang Syndicate wouldn't stop. And neither would whatever other enemies Lady Vara had hidden in the dark. He sent a message to Vara's flagship, short and to the point. "We need to talk. Face to face." Her reply came almost instantly. "Dock at Vale Station. You will be received." The trip there was tense. Koresh kept weapons ready. Lyra double-checked every sensor sweep. And Piri wouldn't leave his side. She kept asking if they were going home. Jack didn't know how to answer. Home wasn't a word he'd thought about in years, but as he looked at the three of them sitting together in the lounge, something in his chest shifted. When the Vale Station came into view, Jack was struck by its beauty. It was massive, shaped like a silver flower blooming in space, each petal a curved docking wing. Ships moved in precise patterns, and everywhere he looked, lights shimmered like a city floating in the void. Lady Vera's guards met them at the hatch, silent and heavily armed. They led Jack and the daughters through high halls of crystal and metal until they reached a private chamber. Vera was waiting, sitting at a long table with a glass of whiskey beside her. "You came," she said softly. Jack stepped forward. "We need to end this." Her violet eyes studied him. "End it. Or claim it." Jack's jaw tightened. "Your enemies keep coming for them, and I'm tired of being the bait." Vera smiled faintly. "You have kept them safe." "Better than I expected." She stood, moving closer until she was only a step away. "Then take the final step. Jack of Earth, accept them as your wives under the law of the Veil. And no one can touch them without declaring open war." Jack glanced back at Lyra, Koresh, and Piri. Lyra's calm eyes held a question. Koresh's gaze burned with defiance. And Piri, she just smiled, hopeful. He knew what saying yes meant. It wasn't just a symbolic role. It meant binding himself to their fate forever. But saying no meant walking away and leaving them in a world full of hunters. He took a slow breath. "Fine," he said. "We do it your way, but I set the rules." Vera raised a silver eyebrow. "Rules?" Jack nodded. "They stay on my ship. They make their own choices. And if you ever put them in danger to test me again, I'll walk away. Law or no law." For a long moment, Vera said nothing. Then she smiled, not the cold smile he'd seen before, but something warmer. "Agreed," she said. The ceremony was quick, just a spoken vow in the old Vale tongue. a shared drink from a silver cup, and the placing of a woven band on his wrist. When it was done, the daughters stood beside him, and Vera addressed the silent guards. From this moment, they are under his name, harm them. And you answer to me, later, in the docking bay, as they prepared to leave. Koresh leaned on the railing beside him. You realize this means you're stuck with us now, she said with a smirk. Jack chuckled dryly. Yeah, I figured. Lyra approached, holding a small case of supplies Vera had sent with them. Lady Vera keeps her promises, she said quietly, but she also keeps her secrets. Be ready. Piri ran ahead into the ship, calling over her shoulder. Come on, husband. Let's go find somewhere fun. Jack followed them aboard, the band on his wrist feeling heavier than it should, as the ship lifted from the station and the silver petals of Vale Station faded into the stars. He looked at them, 3 daughters of a powerful alien woman, now tied to him by law and by something far more dangerous: loyalty. They weren't just passengers anymore. They weren't just trouble. They were his, and he was theirs. He settled into the pilot's chair, setting a course toward open space. We're not staying anywhere too long, he said. And we're going to need more guns, Koresh grinned. Lyra simply nodded, and Piri bounced in her seat as the engines roared. Jack caught a final glimpse of the stars and thought he saw movement. A shadow slipping out of view. Somewhere out there, the syndicate still waited, and somewhere else, Lady Vera no doubt planned her next move. But for now, Jack had a crew, a strange new family, and a galaxy full of enemies. And that was fine, because he was done running.